from the Seminary of the Immaculate Conception in Huntington. After ordination, he served for 6 years in the parish of Queen of Angels in Sunnyside, New York. In the fall of 1997, he was sent for post-ordination studies to the Academy of St. Alphonse, an institute for moral theology within the Lateran University in Rome. Father Caccavale received a licentiate in sacred theology in 1999 and a doctorate in 2001. Returning to the United States, he served on the faculty of the Seminary of the Immaculate Conception in Huntington, where he taught moral theology in the Master of Divinity, an MA in theology, and MA in pastoral studies programs for 11 years. Father is currently on the faculty of St. Joseph Seminary in Yonkers. As part of the new interdiocesan partnership for seminary formation and theological education of the laity for the Archdiocese of New York, the Diocese of Brooklyn, and the Diocese of Rockville Center. Please welcome Father Caccavale.
Hopefully it won't fall down. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for that warm welcome. Thank you, Alan, and Maria for that introduction. And congratulations to the honorees today. It's great to see so many people here supporting the pro-life movement. And let me just begin with a little bit of a disclaimer. I think this is actually how I was asked to do this. That Maria had seen something on Telecare, which is the television station of the Diocese of Rockville Center, and there was an educational conference on this issue. So if you happen to see that on television, then you could just take a little rest, because the church hasn't changed all that much in 2 months since I was talking about this before. But I'm really intimidated a bit when I heard the previous people who have spoken to you. Some of them I know very well. Certainly by reputation, Monsignor Smith, who used to teach at St. Joseph Seminary as well, and my colleagues there, Father Tom Berg and Father Katersky. So I'm a little intimidated in the sense that, and any Sisters of Life, I mean, you can't get better than that. So I hope what I offer today will just help us in some small way. Certainly the current situation that we face in New York, here in this state, is that there are proposals being put forward for physician-assisted suicide that will go before the New York State Legislature. And while we still need to seek and work for protection at the beginning of life, now we find ourselves having to face the same thing at the end of life, seeking to keep our society in a place that continues to celebrate the gift of life in all its stages and in all its forms. I'm not going to speak about the proposed legislation as such. I think one of the previous speakers was also Kathy Gallagher, who I've worked with in the past. She too was on that Telecare program. So I'm not going to speak about that, but rather how we as Catholics, as we as Christians, people of goodwill, how do we speak about this particular issue of physician-assisted suicide? How do we defend our position and our conviction of the importance of being pro-life? In order to view the context, I think, of where we are today, particularly with this issue, and it's really with all the end-of-life issues, but certainly any kind of push for assisted suicide in any way, which unfortunately is already legal in some places in the United States and countries in Europe. But as a context, I remember back in October this past year, October 2015, I was sitting at my desk working and I had the news on in the background. And so I was just vaguely aware of a little story that was on the news. And it was the day that Governor Jerry Brown was signing the legislation that will eventually allow for physician-assisted suicide in the state of California. And what caught my ear as I was listening was simply this: they were interviewing someone, I forget if she was a healthcare worker or a government worker, but she was obviously happy that the governor was going to sign this. And she used the phrase, she said, finally, we can eliminate unnecessary suffering. And that's what caught my ear, because of course, we would try to eliminate unnecessary suffering. But what struck me was that she never made mention of the fact that in order to eliminate the unnecessary suffering, you had to eliminate the person who was suffering. And that really struck me that our society, for many people the shift has occurred, but more and more the shift is moving towards not so much focusing on the person who is suffering, but to focus on the suffering of the person. And that might be a very subtle shift, but I think it indicates where people begin in thinking about this issue and looking at this issue, and therefore where you begin what you see as your goal. In a sense then, suffering is no longer seen as the condition of a particular person, but the person becomes the condition for the existence of suffering, or for the condition of suffering. So if we believe that we must address suffering at any and all costs, then the elimination of the person who is suffering really becomes the means to our goal, to eliminate unnecessary suffering as some sort of ultimate good or absolute good to pursue. So I think that is the context in which many people, many good people, think about this issue. There's so much that focuses on the reality of suffering. And let's be honest, nobody really wants to suffer. We take an aspirin if we have a headache because we don't want to suffer. And so many people then see this as the goal. We must eliminate suffering, because that's the terrible thing. And lose sight of the fact that it is a person who has to be eliminated. And yet that's the context, I think. But what should our context be? What should be the parameters, in a sense, in which we think about this issue and talk about this issue with the people that we meet who might be hearing this and thinking about it and saying, oh, you know, that sounds humane to me. Well, I think in an ironic way, we can see the context when we really look at what is motivating many of the supporters of this kind of legislation, many of the supporters of assisted suicide. Because what really motivates them, because they're not all terrible, evil people, what motivates them, if you ask them, is mercy, compassion, the freedom that we all want and look for in our life, and human dignity. So often this kind of legislation is purported to be a death with dignity. So human dignity, human freedom, mercy, that's what people who are supporting this kind of legislation would tell you why they support it. And in a sense, that should be our context. Human freedom, mercy, compassion, human dignity. But all of those words are Christian words. All of those words have a Christian origin. They're all founded in our belief in God, in the goodness of God and the love of God. That's how we understand any of those terms: mercy, compassion, freedom, human dignity. They all come from our belief in a loving God. And so as soon as you detach the foundation of those terms, when you detach God from those terms, then those terms are distorted from their true meaning. And so though people will tell you that in supporting physician-assisted suicide, what they're really trying to do is be merciful to people or compassionate or allow people to live out their dignity and their freedom, the truth is they've distorted the meaning of the word. They're not really supporting what those words truly mean. I think it is very providential that this issue is coming up. We're here talking about it this morning in this Jubilee year of mercy. Because I think that is the deeper moral issue. Who we are as Christians and how we are merciful like the Father, how we are merciful like God. But the question is, what is true mercy? What is true mercy? So what I'd like to do this morning, hopefully briefly, is to just speak a little bit about the terminology that's connected with this issue, as well as defining those terms for the issue. And then I'd like to simply reflect on the heart of this issue from the moral perspective and the moral understanding of the church. To reflect on the heart of the moral issue. And then finally to say a few words about what our response as Catholics, as Christians, as people of goodwill, what our response should be. We cannot really speak about assisted suicide without also talking about euthanasia. And euthanasia, of course, is an example of what I was saying before, how Christian terms get twisted or they deviate or distorted. Because the term euthanasia speaks about the good death, the good death. And euthanasia, in a sense, goes against the fundamental principle that we as believers hold, right from the scriptures, right from the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not kill. Scripture specifies the prohibition contained in the fifth commandment in the book of Exodus. Do not slay the innocent and the righteous. The deliberate murder of an innocent person is gravely contrary to the dignity of the human being, to the golden rule, and to the holiness of the Creator. The law forbidding it is universally valid. It obliges each and everyone, always and everywhere. And that is right from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 2261. In 1980, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith issued a document on euthanasia. And there we find the definition of euthanasia. And it says this: by euthanasia is understood an action or an omission which of itself or by intention causes death in order that all suffering may be in this way eliminated. Euthanasia's terms of reference, therefore, are found in the intention of the